The first week or so of the legislative session was dominated by talk of gun control. Remember this? Public testimony on a proposal to require background checks for nearly all sales at gun shows stretched for hours. In the end, the long-winded nature of the debate and the fact that it took place on the Senate floor during the final session doomed Miguel Garcia's bill, Tom. And was this really a surprise to you, or what happened to the momentum? There was national momentum stitched with local momentum. Something had to change about guns, but it didn't.
Well, nothing. Well, and what happened was time.
Right.
The farther we get from national tragedies, the farther these priorities kind of drop down the list. It's unfortunate because I think that Representative Garcia's bill was well intended and is needed because it does close that loophole. And so I think to the Senate's credit, though, they saw that there was other legislation that was in their eyes also very important, and they saw that the great power that this had to lock up the dialogue like it did at the closing hours. So,
right.
It's unfortunate, but yeah, that is one of the bills that I think should have actually gotten through and gotten up to the governor's
And the
desk.
governor supported that, Dan. It's interesting how even with that push, it couldn't quite crack through.
Yeah, I think, I just think that the issue when it comes to firearms is really not a Republican-Democrat issue. I think you're finding it in New Mexico to be more urban and rural.
Okay.
I think you're finding more legislators that live in Albuquerque have a much different opinion, regardless of party, than people that live up in northern New Mexico, southern New Mexico. And so I think that what happens is when these things come through and they get to the floor like that, you never know who's going to step up. You never know if it's going to be a Democrat in the Senate or a Republican in the Senate or two that come together, and you could really just cause a real problem because at the end of the day, that debate goes on for a lengthy period of time. People's feelings get hurt. Then someone's going to show them, and this thing just becomes a train wreck as time goes on. So, when you get in these late hours, you really try to get this stuff, you used to see in the past, they try to get this stuff done early, let all the fights happen, let everybody argue about it, and then it'd sit on the table, and in the 11th hour you pull it out and say, don't say a word, you guys all had debated this for 3 days a month ago, let's vote.
And House Bill 77, it's not like it was late into the game.
That's
It was one of the first bills that was entered.
And all the headlines for a
And
bit.
the truth is, on the timing, it sat in the Senate Judiciary for over a month without a hearing. So it didn't have to be the last bill at the last moment in the last half hour.
Was it just doomed
And,
because of that?
Well, I think that, you never know what goes on behind closed doors, but maybe the chairman of that committee had a bill he wanted out of somewhere else. Maybe it wasn't getting moved along.
Judiciary has forever been a
but I think,
death grip place for anything.
That's going to come up with a couple more
Judiciary.
subjects here, too. Now, Sophie, interesting, you voiced your displeasure, actually the Lieutenant Governor did, about the way the Hannah Skandera hearings were handled. But Sophie, let me ask you this. Now that we've had another pass at this, and she is not confirmed, somebody seems to me it just is going to come out the loser here beyond Ms. Skandera and beyond the governor. Was Ms. Lopez correct in the approach she took in committee to not allow this to happen yet again? Something doesn't seem quite kosher here.
I will say that I sat at this table a number of weeks ago and said that I thought that Secretary designate, however we say it, Skandera deserved a hearing.
Yep.
Those hearings were highly contentious. I'm not certain.
10 hours worth.
I'm not certain that she would have gotten the thumbs up. I'm not. At the end of the day, it may in fact have been better for her to have it sort of sit. We had talked here about even if she's not confirmed, they can continue to hire her until they confirm a new person.
That's right.
So she's not going anywhere.
Is that appropriate, Lieutenant Governor?
Well, I think we talked about this before, but, everybody had their say.
Okay.
And I personally would have liked to see it come to a vote so that, she got a thumbs up or a thumbs down. It's not going to make her, frankly, I think she's now, she got a lot of sympathy out of the fact that,
I think the way it was handled really played into the governor and Secretary Designee Skandera's hands. I think it helped them.
Yeah.
I think even people who are very partisan, people who draw a line, people who are unions or homeschools, doesn't matter. I still think they're respectful. And I think when you set somebody down for 10 hours and you allow people to go after them for 10 hours, you don't give them that opportunity to have their speak. You bring someone in like Michael Corwin to do what he did. Teachers get 20 seconds, he gets hours to just spit vile at the secretary, and she doesn't have an opportunity. I'm shocked that Senator Lopez would be tying Democrats to Michael Corrin and that organization with all the stuff that's being alleged with them. I think that this really played into her hands. I think it really made Secretary Scandera more powerful because I think she handled it so well. She didn't lash out. The governor didn't attack Adam. It didn't do things. That she sat there through the, pictures of the Journal. I remember the picture in the Journal of the day of her just looking over her shoulder and this picture of her face, and someone's pointing at her and she's just looking at her.
I don't think that it's more power. I mean,
I
I
don't
think she
either.
just has
I think she
some
got sympathy.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
she
But I think
still
with
is
that
not
comes power.
respected among the people that she has the most to do with. She doesn't have a lot of respect among the people
But should that
within
be
the
an issue
educational.
now? I mean, that's been established. Should that be the issue, Tom, about her not being confirmed? I have to ask again, the governor had some harsh words, a few of them, but some harsh words for Senator Lopez about this. It just fair seems fair here at some level, no matter, and given what you're saying, Lieutenant Governor, everyone can understand that, but fair's fair, it seems to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, this wasn't the only thing that was held up. I'm sure Senator Michael Sanchez would have loved to have had, the tapping the permanent fund to come down into the Senate floor. Sure. But so everybody has pieces of legislation they wanted to come through. People they wanted to have approved. It's the rules of the game. I didn't like this rule of the game, though. I thought that after 10 hours she needed to.
I think the big difference, though, Tom, is that Senator Sanchez had a piece of legislation that's sitting on a shelf. Secretary Designate Scandera is a person that sat through 10 hours of being ridiculed. And people keep forgetting, there were about as many people there supporting her as there were against her. The unions are adamantly opposed to her. But there's rank and file teachers, superintendents, principals that showed up in numbers saying they were in favor of her being
But the bottom of
confirmed.
the line is at the end of the day, she still has a job.
Yeah.
She's still
Right.
there.
Yeah,
she
she's
still has
still
a job.
there.
So
Had they voted no, then she doesn't have a job.
Right.
That's why I think
Well,
I think
there's
they
no
had the
guarantee
votes.
of that either. She wouldn't be
No.
the secretary, but she could still be in the
Well, they
administration.
could just
Sure.
reappoint her.
Sure.
And actually, it's not about her just being a person. It's about the policies she represents that impact. When I talked about below the line funding, let me just say that what happens is we can't change policy every 4 years. Schools are not going to survive that, to have, in 4 years or 8 years come in, we have another Secretary of Education, may go through the same kind of rigorous debate about whether they have the right ideas. But schools, like businesses, need some predictability in what's going to be happening.
Sure. Let me ask you guys an overall question about this subject. It seems to me it's about something else. And that is the power structure of the Senate specifically. And what was shown this past session about how this works. And we had Michael Sanchez, certainly, who is working with health issues, perhaps was not able to keep his eye completely on the ball. He's got some semi-seasoned lieutenants underneath him, Tom, that have not been, in leadership positions for long. Was something get shown here through the Scandera thing and other things about the balance of power?
No, I mean,
Okay.
the Senate ran the same this session as it has ever since Michael Sanchez has been, the Senate Majority Leader. Whenever somebody, has a health issue, we saw it also occur on the House side as well. It's the headlines, it's fresh, it's juicy, but those things tend to get blown out of proportion. But I don't see that anything changed. As
Okay.
far, I mean, the Senate has run the same this session as it has in past sessions.
And I personally disagree to the extent that, I think when Tim Jennings was there, Tim Jennings played ball with the Democrats. Tim Jennings was more in tune to, he at home, he really tried to play himself up as this conservative Democrat. But in Santa Fe, he really worked with the progressives. Mary Kay Papen, Senator Papen, Senator Smith and stuff, I think that they drew a line in the sand. I think the balance of power is shifting. When you're the majority leader in the Senate and you have a bill that's very important to you and you can't even get it heard in committee, that hadn't happened when I was in the
But
legislature.
it's anybody who knows how Senator Sanchez runs the Senate, which is what I was really referring to, knows that he respects the committee process. Not everybody likes it, but he respects
But
it.
I've seen Senator Sanchez get his stuff done,
Sure.
and Senator Sanchez could twist a good arm. He's no weakling in this deal. I just think
He's Senate majority leader.
right.
Yeah,
I think the power. I think the balance of power is shifting, and I think that's what helps. I think, in my opinion, that's what helped Governor Martinez have a huge success and helped her reach across the aisle to get things
Lieutenant Governor,
done.
your thoughts on that?
Well, I
Power,
just think that some people overstep the bounds of power, and if you hearken back to the days of Aubrey Dunn and people, he's much like John Arthur Smith has turned into Aubrey Dunn Jr. With, doing things without consent of his committee or even giving things a vote within his committee, and those things have lives, and they don't last forever.
Is it a lack of fear that allows that? This is what I'm getting at here. Are committee chairs now feeling their oats a little bit more because there is a bit of a void or a vacuum up top? Is that a
Well,
possibility?
I think that the longer you're in a committee chairmanship, the more you feel those oaths, whether there's a leadership or my guess is that, you know, especially on the land grant permanent fund, that John Arthur was not going to give his committee a chance to vote on that because he personally was not for that.
Sure.
But remember, we saw this. We saw this for years in the House with Raymond Sanchez as Speaker and Max Call. You had Raymond and Manny constantly fighting over where the budget's going to start,
Right.
House, Senate, who's going to do this, and Max had this fist because he understood it.
Right.
I think in the Senate, what you see, never mind the Michael Sanchez, Mary Kay Papin deal. You look at the Senate Democrats. Who's the next person to step up that understands the budget like John Arthur Smith? And I think a lot of people think if he takes his toys and goes home, it really puts the Democrats in a bad position.
Low bar. Understands the budget.
Yeah.
Is such a low bar for a legislator. He's the only person who gets it. Get in there, study the budget. That's your job.
There you go.
Exactly.
I'm going to stay with you, Sophie. As usual, there are a number of measures to tighten DWI penalties this past round. Some notables didn't pass. Now, are lawmakers reaching the limit to what they think they can do regarding penalties? And I must add, penalties in the overall did not fare well in this session. When you really look at it, it's
No, they
interesting.
didn't. It's an interesting thing to note. There were bills. You can't drink at all. You can't purchase alcoholic beverages at all if you have an ignition interlock.
That's right.
Tightening sentencing guidelines for other crimes based on whether you've had a DWI, and those didn't get very far. What I don't feel I'm seeing, though, is a turn toward preventative measures that might address the root cause, which is the terrible problem that we have with alcoholism in our state.
Right.
And so, does this hearken? Are we turning and saying like, we can only get so far with penalties. We need to address the root issue.
Interesting.
I'm not seeing that yet.
Getcha.
And
Yeah.
on the other hand, we passed a bill that allows us to sell alcohol earlier
right.
on Sunday.
Interesting.
Right.
I mean, that to
glad
me
you-
is kind of the hooray. We might all need a drink earlier on Sunday. But,
I think-
but the truth is that there wasn't much appetite for this. I know that the Democrats were focused on the jobs, the capital outlay, how that was going to be done. I think everybody was focused on how do we actually turn this economy around, and there wasn't much appetite
Yeah.
for invoking more penalties.
Right.
But I
It just
do-
was in the air quickly.
It's okay. Go ahead.
Okay, right on there. We have an on-the-clock segment this week. That's going to be online only. Visit NewMexicoInFocus.org. Thank you all. Great wrap-up. Really appreciate it.